Hi everyone, welcome back to my Python training. This video we're going to talk about exception handling. Exceptions are bad, but they do happen, and quite often they crash the program and leave some cryptic message that's designed for programmers but ends up in front of the user. So we want to avoid that by capturing the exception, having the program continue to work, and leaving a relevant message as to why the problem happened. We're going to look at some common exceptions in Python and see how to deal with them. The first common error is a divide by zero error. If we run this, we see that we can't divide 10 by 0. Now, it's not that programmers or people writing code don't understand that you can't divide by 0. Pretty much everyone knows that. But this often happens as a result of a function or variable somewhere else in the program that comes up with a null or a 0 unexpectedly, and then is used in a subsequent division, and this is what caused. So it's a little harder to trace it and get it, but when you're dividing, you should put some control in here to prevent this. An out of index message happens quite a lot. This is very common when dealing with lists. As you remember from our lesson on lists, each item in the list has an index, has a number, and that's how you call the specific item within a list. But what the mistake that's often made is, you can see by my int list here that there are 8 items. So if we want the last one on the item, we could search for the index 8, and that would generate an error message, because while there are 8 items in the list, it starts at 0. So there are many other ways that this can, when you're working with multiple lists, but the bottom line is that when you look for the index on a list that's above the items in a list, you'll get this message. It is very common. We haven't worked with files yet. That's in the next lesson, 1.11. But opening and closing and processing files can be tricky. If the file's not found, or if the format's wrong, you will get a file not found error. So it's a very common error message too. So when working with files, it's always important to build in some kind of exception handling. So if we run this here, we see that we get the file not found error because myfile.txt does not exist. So we look at this more in the next lesson, but keep in mind again that when you're working with files or anything that can go wrong, this it's prudent to build in some exception handling. And the last exception that happens quite often is the type error. So in this case, when we print an integer and a string, we'll get an error message. Now, you would think that this would be caught a lot in the actual development and not afterwards, but it can happen when there are variables coming in from other functions, and that's when this can generate this message. So anyway, if you have a situation where there's a lot of variables coming in from other modules or other functions, it's probably best to put some kind of exception handling in the print statement. So now that I've told you all the ways we can get in trouble with programming in Python, there is some good news. Python handles exceptions very elegantly and simply. So to put a command or statement or function that you're concerned about generating an exception, you simply put it in a try and except block. So it's indented similar to a function. So here's where you put the code that you want to make sure that is not going to crash the program if something goes wrong. So now when we run this, it just simply says you cannot divide by 0, but there are no exceptions, and the program would continue to run. So it works the same with the out of index error that we got when we print the index of a list that is out of range. So in this case, we have our print myInt number 8, that's not there. And we're going to get an exception here that tells us why there's an exception. And then I put this line here to show that the program still continues to run after this exception. So if we run this, we should see that the message came up, the index is out of range. But more importantly, the program kept running and ran the command after the block. So that's the point of using the try and except block. It generates the error, but the program continues to run. And the more explicit you are with the exception error, the better it will be for the user to try and fix it, or for you as the programmer to fix it. When we do file handling in the next lesson, you'll see how valuable the try and except block is, because files can generate a lot of exceptions. In our file previous example, we created a variable here to include the file name. So now when we put the variable in here, we can print that the exact file name cannot be found. And this gives the user some valuable information to tell him or her what file is missing. So if we run this, let's see. It is an explicit statement that says that the file, my file text, cannot be found. And then we show again that the program continues to run. There's quite a bit more to exception handling in Python. There are entire objects and classes set up to deal with it. I don't want to get into that at this point, but just to show you, for example, you could put the specific error message here, file not found error message. So when you run it, you will still get the same message, but now you know, as the programmer, you know that this was a file not found there. Now this is obvious in this case, but some other places it may not be obvious, and you want to be sure that you're generating the right error message. For now, it's key to understand that if you put dubious statements in the try and except block, you'll be good most of the time. For example, when you're taking input from users and you're not sure what they're going to do, if you're looking for an integer and they type in text, this is a good way to ensure that you get the input that you're looking for. That covers the basics of exception handling in Python. In the next video, we're going to look at files and how to process whole files in your program. If you want the text or the code for this video, please go to my website at pythonforadultsandkids.com. Don't forget to subscribe and share if you like this content. And thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.